Good evening and welcome to Watchmen on the Wall. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're reporting from Houdini Spa, a popular holiday resort here in the Western Cape, and I'm talking to Andre Jacobs, who's organized the Unity Convention. Now, the Unity Convention is a gathering of colored leaders here in the Western Cape that's going to be talking about self-determination for colored people. Andre, have I got that correct?
That's correct. It's about getting people to come together under one umbrella and to look forward to a progressive way in which we're going to be interacting in the 2014 elections. So next year's elections is crucial for the people of color in South Africa. First of all, because they've been left out for so long, out of government, out of the decision making of the country, and our people are saying it's enough, they had enough now, and they need to do something positive about it for next year.
And when you talk about people of color, you're talking about colored people? Is that colored people only? Or are you talking about colored, black and Indian people?
Well, we are very much a mix in South Africa. So the term colored has its roots back in history. That is totally fallen by the wayside. Yet some people still live with the coloured aspect, the classification aspect, and it's something that people have embraced. That is who they are. That's where they stem from. And for those who are new in the 1994 democratic South Africa, it resembles a new hope in that we have become, or the people of colour in South Africa have become, a mixed race. Doing away with the pure race aspect in South Africa. So clearly, the new Rainbow Nation, or the Rainbow Nation referred to in 1994, is actually the people of colour.
Now, I've heard, as I've been talking to some of the leadership here, that there's rumblings and growing discontent with the situation of coloured people in the Western Cape and the rest of South Africa, and that is they feel that coloured people are more marginalised. There was issues spoken about with correctional service where warders and that cannot get promotions because they coloured and not seen as African. So is this what has motivated this gathering here today?
Absolutely, yes, Errol. The new legislation on employment equity stipulates that 78% of all jobs needs to go to African blacks in South Africa. Now, the people of colour have always been between black and white. Pre-1994, we were all black. And post-94, we are coloured. And when it comes to election time, suddenly everyone is equal. But in terms of employment equity, coloureds only are allocated 8% of the actual job allocation. Indians are looking at 2% and whites at 6%. This is representative of the national populace. Now we feel that it's unfair to impose a national equity agenda on provincial aspects where the provincial representation in the Western Cape alone is 54% for coloured people. So therefore, coloured people in the Western Cape should get 54% of the jobs. But this is not the case.
Yeah, what are they getting?
Well, it's, national legislation dictates that 8% of all jobs, that's 8% of jobs, 8% of your applications that you make to university, to colleges, etc., learning institutions, that the intake will be 8%. So this has a rippled effect all the way through. Also, if you have a business, you need to apply this national legislation in its proper proportion. Now, we feel that is unfair, and the people inside here in this conference today are saying, we've had enough of being classified and reclassified and being allocated jobs based on a figure which is basically a thumbsuck. And we face the decline of the people of colour, or the coloured nation, who is now interbred. 1994 has allowed integration to occur. There's no longer a pure race of white or a pure race of black. We now have a coloured nation, a rainbow nation. And this is something which the new government, post next year's election, will have to deal with. And we would like to have an audible voice in next year's election.
Do you see the only way of that is by forming a coloured political party that will look at the issues that are concerning coloured people? Or do you think you can work within the ANC, within the DA to bring about these solutions?
It needs to be a progressive stance. We've tried various things in the past where political parties were formed, and already to date in South Africa there's over 200 political parties, whether they are dormant or not, or whether they're active or inactive. But that's neither here nor there. The fact is we need to be progressive and be part of a united South Africa, to play a role, a meaningful role, and have a purposeful agenda in adding value to the present government in South Africa. Now, we can do it in isolation, but that has been proven it's not going to work. So we need to form a coalition that would enable us to move forward progressively and positively contribute to a united South Africa. But we are driven by legislation which is unduly imposed on people or misinterpreted by the present officials, where it brings a disbenefit to people other than black.
I see. So later on in the show then, we're going to see some of the talks by the leaders that have gathered here this afternoon. And also we'll be speaking later to Mr. Dr. Titus. Also Peter Maree. Peter Maree, well known, has been in politics for many, many years with the National Party, has been a premier in the Western Cape and also an executive mayor. So more after this break. Stay tuned. We're going to be talking to some of these leaders and also want to find out what the outcomes is going to be. Don't go away.
En dit, liewe vriende, is wat 'n vriend van my onlangs gesê het. Ons taak vandag is anders as die verlede, toe ons moes bekwam het in ons onderskeie professies en ambagte. Dit moet ons ook doen. Maar ons taak vandag is om werk te verskaf vir ons kinders. Dink 'n bietjie daaroor. Dit bring my by 'n verhaal wat my altyd die laaste paar jaar aanspreek, wanneer dit kom by bruin gemeenskappe. Dis die verhaal van die student wat by professor Albert Einstein eksamen moes gaan skryf het. En hy het hom baie goed voorberei, want dit was Einstein. En hy het die eksamen gaan skryf, en toe hy klaar geskryf het, toe storm hy by Einstein se kantoor uit, toe sê professor Einstein, hoe durf jy? Hoe durf ek wat, sê Einstein, sy hare staan nog so die mekaar. Hy sê, jy het wragtig dieselfde vraag gaan vra, hierdie jaar, wat jy laas jaar gevra het. Einstein sê, laat ek maar 'n bietjie sien. Hy sê, jy is reg, ek het dieselfde vraag gevra. Maar weet jy wat is die verskil? Die antwoorde het verander. En dit vir my is ons gesprek van vandag. Die antwoorde het verander. As jy dink om na breinmense te kyk asof ons nog in 1976 deel was van die opstande teen apartheid, die antwoorde het verander. Kyk maar na die Junievieringe, asof ons nie daar was nie, asof ons nie geskiet is nie, asof ons nie in moeilike tye in die gevangenes deurgebring het nie, die antwoorde het verander. As jy dink dat dinge nog steeds dieselfde is toe ons ouers vir ons gesê het, kry jou geleerdheid my kind, want geleerdheid kan niemand van jou afneem nie. Dink weer, die antwoorde het verander. Dis nou geleerdheid en geleenthede en besighede wat ons moet skep. As jy dink jy kan staat maak op moederstaat om vir jou werk te verskaf of 'n groot maatskappy, dink weer. Die antwoorde het verander. Ons was nie wit genoeg nie. En ons is nie swart genoeg nie. Meneer Andre Jonkers van korrektiewe dienste sit in die getuiebank in die arbeidshof. En hy sê ek is 40 jaar oud. Korrektiewe dienste sê ek is die beste kandidaat, maar ek kan nie die pos kry nie. My velkleur tel teen my. Ek is bruin, meneer. Advokaat Marumo Morani is een van die land se voorste regskundiges en advokate en hy sê aan meneer Jonkers in die hof, ek het simpatie met jou. Maar kan jy sien dat in 'n poging om reg te stel wat in die verlede verkeerd was, gaan sommige mense ongelukkig wees? Meneer Jonkers antwoord, wil jy my vertel dat vanaf 2008 gaan ek nooit weer bevorder word nie oor my kleur? In die 10 bestuursgebiede in die Weskaap is daar nie een hoofbestuurder nie. Die koerant Beeld sê Morani het vir Jonkers verskeie kere gevra oor apartheid, onder meer dat bruin mense in die Weskaap by aanstellingsvoorkeur bo swart mense geniet het. Jonkers het nie daarvan geweet nie, sluit die koerant af. Die antwoorde, dames en here, het verander. En as jy dink dat dit hier gaan oor bruin mense, en u is nie bruin nie, maar eerste nasie, klink vir my na coloureds, sal jy mag sê, maar ek is mos nie colored nie, ek is First Nation. Luister na advokaat Tommy Ntsewa oor werk wat gedoen is oor die Khoisan deur die Departement van Tradisionele Sake. Hy het gepraat by die onlangse beraad in Kimberley tydens die Khoisan dialoog Reversing the Legacy of the 1913 Native Land Act. Hy praat oor die Khoisan gemeenskappe wat uitgesluit is in hoofstuk 12 van die grondwet wat handel oor tradisionele leierskap. Hulle was nie tydens die grondwet onderhandelinge bewus van die gemeenskappe nie. Dit beteken dat die grondwet se hoofstuk 12 gewysig sal moet word om die gemeenskappe in te sluit. Maar dan sê die advokaat, Mr. Minister, I'd from the beginning state that I am not dealing with the so-called indigenous communities or First Nations, because so far this has not been established that there can be any community in South Africa that can claim to be more indigenous than the other African communities. Our understanding is that there are Africans as a whole in their diversities who are the indigenous inhabitants of the continent, southern and neither regions. There can therefore not be First Nations today to the exclusions of others in Africa and South Africa in particular. Those who argue otherwise must provide evidence that there were others in this continent than them. Advocaat Nchewa sluit af, hy sê, we therefore move from a premise that there are no First Nations or Last Nations in South Africa, and that we are all subject to the Constitution that considers all of us as equals with individual rights to participate in the affairs of the country, irrespective of whether one is a descendant of the slave community, imported labor from the East, or European settlers who were prisoners or indigenous African communities. Die antwoorde, dames en here, het verander en daarom is ons hier. As u van mening is dat die enigste opsie om hierdie goed aan te spreek is om 'n politieke party te stig. Kom ons praat daaroor, want ek dink die antwoorde het daar ook verander. Politieke partye bestaan omdat dit mense se demokratiese reg is om hulle polities te organiseer om die beste vir hulle volgelinge te propageer. Dit is goed vir die demokrasie dat mense hulle self kan uitdruk en dat hulle uit kan kom vir hulle standpunte. Dit is ook goed vir bruin mense dat politieke partye hulle skaar by die behoeftes en die belange van bruin mense. Maar ek dink dit is tyd om ons luidsprekers 'n bietjie sagter te stel. So sag dat ander mense kan begin hoor wat ons sê. Professor Mohammed Adikari skryf 'n boek, Burdened by Race, waar hy wys na bruin mense in Zimbabwe. breinmense in Malawi, breinmense in Zambië, breinmense in Uganda. Die president van Ghana, Jerry Rawlings, was 'n breinman. Maar hy wys hoe dat hy, wat in die departement van geskiedenis by Kaapstad Universiteit werk, hoe hy eendag 'n paper moes gaan lewer het by Wits Universiteit en hoe 'n ander breingeskiedkundige ou vir hom gesê het, as jy die paper 'n paar jaar gelede kom hou het hier by ons, was ek die eerste in die mob van mense wat jou sou afgejaag het van hierdie kampus af. Mense, akademici, aktiviste is bang vir die bruin identiteit. Maar hulle begin nou, hulle oë gaan oop, hulle hou konferensies, hulle sien dit nou. Ons wil vir hulle sê, hier is plek. Ons wil vir hulle sê, ons het baie om saam te doen. Die antwoorde het verander. En ek wens u die beste vir hierdie konferensie. Baie dankie.
Okay, so Dr. Titus, we want to make sure that people understand what this movement is and what it's not. So just describe it. What is it for colored people in South Africa?
It's really a question of understanding where we are now, 2013 in South Africa, and how further. We have been shocked by the attack on colored people by the Department of Correctional Services, where they said very clearly there is no place for such an oversupply, as they called it, of colored people in the Western Cape. In terms of the national demographics, there are 9% colored people countrywide. In the Western Cape, there are 52%. So they now want to apply national demographics to the region, meaning they want to bring down colored people to 9%. And that has such a lot of implications in terms of group areas for colored people again, moving colored people outside of the Western Cape. So that really was quite real because the case is before the Labour Court at the moment. And the overall argument of Mr. Jimmy Manji, where he indicated colored people are in oversupply, which so many people denied, are now becoming quite real. And that's why people are saying, let us now realize what is our responsibility in terms of that in the first place, and also how can we ensure that we are seen as part of the broader South Africa, that when the Freedom Charter speaks of South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, to include colored people there as well. Because you know the beauty of colored people is that we are family and blood family with African people, with white people, with Indian people. We cannot be accused of being exclusive or just to try to be on our own. We belong to the rest of the country. But we are very concerned in the new democracy where the ANC government, with its approach of blacks in general and Africans in particular, where that is taking us. And we feel that is a wrong road. But on the other hand, we also realize that as communities, there is a responsibility on us in the various fields of discipline, fields of work where we are, fields of expertise, that we can hold hands together and work towards the upliftment of people, to show them that despite that there are still opportunities, that we do not need to be so dependent on the state, that we do not need to be so dependent on other people. We can do it ourselves. They are arguing from the research point of view that came out about 2-3 years ago that colored people constitute 60 billion rand as a market. Now we need to just explore that market. We need to show people that they can, in terms of their own responsibilities, their own potential, develop that and bring that to fruition. And that is why people like myself, people like other people in different areas of expertise are coming out, holding hands and trying to plow back for the betterment of that broader ideal.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. I think you cleared that up for us. Thank you.
Today, exactly 41 years ago, I bought my first house in a suburb called Nooit Gedacht in Tygerberg municipality. It was a modest 3-bedroom house on Moradam Road, nothing fancy. But as a young man of 29 years old, father of 3 beautiful children, I was the proudest man on earth. To me, it was a palace. My palace. My very own palace. And I made a vow to love and protect my family and to build a better future for them against all odds. I vowed never to be evicted or to live in a township with squalor all around me. I rallied the support of the community in Nooit Gedag and Bishop Lewis, and I founded the Nooit Gedag Ratepayers and Tenants Association. That was in 1972. Together we battled to convince the then Divisional Council of the Cape to give us street lighting, because there was none. Tarred roads, because there was none. A school, a soccer field for our youth, a robot crossing, and even telephone cables. It was hard work, but we succeeded. I wrote hundreds of letters, and once even led a group of Bishop Lewis residents on a protest march to face Minister Pen Kotze. He was the Minister of Community Development. I marched right into Parliament. With the media following me, they were afraid to arrest me. Because those years, colours couldn't even come to the gates of Parliament. But I marched through the gates to demand that they put my people back in their houses. And it is there that I learned that unity of purpose is the key to any successful venture. I remember how my wife Bonita and I kicked down the doors of rented houses in Bishop Lewis. If you go back in the archives, you'll find the press reports. We kicked down doors of houses to put evicted tenants back because it was raining. The children of these families were crying. They were huddling under the furniture and old blankets while the Minister of Community Development couldn't care less because they owed rent. Rent which they owed not because they didn't want to pay, but because they couldn't pay. We risked being arrested and jailed. Yet it did not stop us. And all my life, I can say proudly, I have fought for the poor. All my life I have fought injustices. And all my life I have faced criticism from people who did nothing to help the suffering masses, but who preferred to be armchair critics. But I was not the only one. Don't think I'm shining my apple. I wasn't the only one who did it. There were others. I call them the forgotten heroes of the past. I'm standing here today to acknowledge and honor thousands of other colored people, men and women, who paid with their lives in the struggle against apartheid to achieve the very freedom which we are currently denied. I'm standing here to try and put into historical context the contributions made by people like Sonny Leon. He was the former leader of the Labour Party. He was also a lieutenant in the army. Norman Middleton, another trade unionist from Natal. David Curry, school teacher. MD Arendse, former trade unionist, and also the leader before Sonny Leon of the Labour Party. Dr. Abdurrahman, the founder of the Unity Movement. Johnny Issel, political activist, is now deceased. Sissy Gould, Professor Richard van der Ros, one of our great educationists. Norman Daniels, city councillor, trade unionist. Hassan Hawa, former president of SACOS. You know, he's the man who said, no normal sport in an abnormal society. And hundreds more who sacrificed so much and opposed the system of apartheid. Johnny Issel and many others were jailed for their efforts. But today they are discriminated against because of their skin color. The very freedom they fought for is no more. Johnny Issel's children do not have more rights than the children of a man who was in a tricameral parliament. They have the same rights. Whether you're in a tricameral parliament, or whether you're an ANC member, or whether you're a member from Kontawi Sizwe, if you're colored, you can't work for correctional services. You can't get promoted unless you can prove you're African. And in terms of the current law, you're not African, you're black, but you're not African. They all fought apartheid. The fact that they have chosen to employ different methods and strategies does not give anyone the right to devalue their contributions. Nobody's contributions should be judged as insignificant or less worthy of recognition. They all did what they thought was right at a certain time in our history. And as we know, politics is the art of what is possible at a certain time of your history. What was possible 20 years ago is no more possible today. Colored people are told that in terms of labor equity laws, they are colored. They're not African. A new political term has been coined, and that coin says black in general, but African in particular, when they refer to black Africans. But before freedom came in 94, the Freedom Charter was drafted in 1955, which said there shall be no distinction on the basis of race or color or sex or religion. Isn't it so? Nou kom ek terug wat Dr. Titus gesê het. Dieselfde vraag, verskillende antwoord. Once more I ask myself, Peter, what can you do to change the plight of your people? Do you still have a role to play or not? Yes. And if yes, what should that role be? Have you not done enough already? And I tell myself, yes, you've done enough already. We had our options and the black people had their options, which they at the time thought was right. Chief Minister Buthelezi did what he thought was right when he took semi-independence for KwaZulu. Professor Nzanwizi did the same when he took semi-independence for Kazankulu. So did blacks living in Kangwani and Kwandebele. Chief Minister Kaiser Matanzima took full independence for Transkei. Chief Oupa Goza took full independence for the Ciskei. President Mangopi took independence for Bophuthatswana. Blacks in these territories voted for independence in a referendum. They had an option, but you and me were never given the right to have a referendum. They were not forced. This was their own free will. They decided by 2/3 vote in a referendum to go for independence. Colored people were given no such option, but as it was a case of take it or leave it. Now the question comes, if they did what they thought was right for their people, why do they still qualify to be empowered in terms of affirmative action, but not coloreds? Most of the colored people rejected the tricameral parliament, isn't it so? It was a minority who voted for it, and it took part in the elections. But 2/3 of blacks voted in a referendum for independence. So they should be punished for benefiting under apartheid. We had no benefits. Show me the land you were given. You were given a tricameral parliament with no land. These chief ministers all had their armies, their own police force, their own educational system, their own civil service. And you had a 4-1. For every 4 whites, there's 2 coloreds and 1 Indian. You had a 4-1 ratio. But even that was better than 88. Now we have a ratio, 78% black, 8% coloreds. It's even worse than the ratio we had before. It was 4-1. We are powerless. At the time, we had nothing. When we took a decision to take part in a tricameral system, because the tricameral system only came in 1984. But more than 20 years before that, the blacks already exercised their option to take independence. And between 1960 and 1984, we had nothing. They couldn't give us land. They couldn't give us our own place, a territory, because we lived cheek by jowl with whites. I spoke, and I had many meetings with Chris Yenes. I was around that time already. I'm in politics 42 years. And I said to Chris, waar is my stuk grond? Hy sê, maar meneer Rebels, jy kan met hom dink. Maar die aard van die saak kan nie weer. Sê, never mind aard van die saak, waar is my grond? Hy sê maar, ons moet 'n ander formule uitwerk vir julle. Julle kan in 'n nuwe bedeling. Even John Foster didn't have the answer for colored people. It was John Foster before P.V. Botha who said, die ding omtrent die kleerlingsaak sal ons kinders eendag moet uitsorteer. Dit was sy woorde. Hulle het nie antwoord gehad nie. Hulle sê die kinders van die blankes moet dit uitsort. Want die kinders van die blankes is nou al oupas en hulle het dit nog nie uitgesort nie. We have been the Achilles heel of the National Party's policy of apartheid, and we will become the Achilles heel of the ANC's policy of equity. Colored people in many respects suffered equally, if not more than black people under apartheid. But who can judge or put a value on degrees of suffering? In 1994 het ons as breinmense voor 'n kruispunt gestaan. Ons was gekonfronteer met die vraag, moes ons links, regs of die middelweg volg? Moes ons vir die ANC, die NNP of die DP stem? Daar was nog nie 'n DA toe nie. Ons het onsself afgevra, watter pad lei na die beloofde land van melk en heuning? Wie kan ons vertrou met ons toekoms? Ons was verward, totaal verdeeld, tot so 'n mate dat ons mekaar in die hare gevlieg het, bespot en beledig het. Vrees vir swart oorheersing en die ANC se geneigtheid tot ernstige geweld met die halsnoermoorde nog vars in ons geheue. Dit het baie na die NP toe gedryf. En ek was een van hulle. Ek het 'n besluit geneem. Maar wie kan ek vertrou in my toekoms? Ek het vir Evie vertrou, maar ek het nie geweet wat hy agterna gaan doen nie. Ons het toe gesê, rather the devil you know than the devil you don't know. So het baie van ons geredeneer. Andere het weer met sterre in hulle oë 'n nuwe sin van belangrikheid gekry deur hulle aanhanging van die UDF. En hulle het dan besluit om die ANC verslaaf te volg. Hulle redenasie was, under black majority rule, we will have a better life for all. Dit was die twee argumente. A better life for all, en ek sê nee, maar ek vertrou die ou meer. Vandag, 19 jaar later, sit ons almal op die rand van moedeloosheid. Op die hoek van 'n doodloopstraat. Die sterre in ons oë het verdwyn. Ons vertroue in 'n nuwe bedeling waarna ons so uitgesien het, lê aan skerwe. En ons vra, Breinman, waarheen nou? Nog die NP, nog die ANC of die DA het met hul beleidsrigtings daarin kon slaag om breinmense uit hul kroniese armoede te red. Selfs die meerderheid swart mense lewe steeds in kroniese armoede. Nie een van hierdie partye kon ons kinders red uit hul dwelm hel nie. Ons kinders sukkel om beurse te kry. Ons paans kan nie permanente werk kry nie. En self kleinsake ondernemers en entrepreneurs loop hulle telkens vas teen rassediskriminasie. Nie die ANC of DA was bereid om korrektiewe dienste aan die gordel te gryp en hof toe te sleep nie. Selfs Popcrew en COSATU het hulpeloos toegekyk hoe ons regte op gruwelike wyse vertrap was. En munisipaliteite hele dag kom. Die nuwe wysigingswet wat nog nie vir parlement gedien het nie, sê munisipaliteite gaan ook ingesluit word by hierdie werknemers wat equity moet toepas. Ek wil sien of Sambu sy werkers gaan verdedig. Of gaat hy ook hands op soos Popcrew? Dis die uitdaging. Solidariteit, wat ons ander dag uitgekry het as 'n regse vakbond. Ons het allemaal gesê, 'n klomp boere, weet ons sê maar boere vir Afrikaners. Maar die boer het nou hand uitgesteek en kom help. In die politiek het jy nie permanente vriende nie. Jy het ook nie permanente vyande nie. Jy het net belange. En vraag jouself, in wie se belange is het dat ons eenheid nou moet nastrewe? Our end is falling to new record heights. Permanent jobs remain a pipe dream. Hulle sê hulle gaan 'n miljoen werk skep. Elke keer as parlement oopgaan, en as jy vra waar, dan is mense wat gou hierdie pad svier. As jy pad klaar gevee is die werk ook op. Daar's geen permanente werk nie. Permanent job is a pipe dream which only lives on in the minds of delusional politicians. Government is hamstrung and powerless to curb the suicidal impulses of COSATU. They lack the determination and leadership qualities of a Margaret Thatcher, who single-handedly saved Great Britain from being blackmailed by the unions. Margaret Thatcher het die unions aan hulle strot gevat. En die vakbonde se mag gebreek om Engeland se ekonomie te red van ondergang. Maar hier sal dit nooit gebeur nie, want al wat tel hier is, hoeveel stemme het jy by Mangoang? We need to turn back the tide. It is almost too late. This journey is not a desire to seek confrontation with black or white people. I'm not looking for confrontation with white or black people. It's a rescue mission to save ourselves and to secure the future of our children. We are Africans in general, but we are South Africans in particular.
Welcome back. I'm with Mr. Peter Mare, a politician that's been around for 42 years as Premier of the province and also a executive mayor in the Cape Town municipality. Peter Mare, welcome to Watchmen on the Wall.
Thank you so much, Errol, for inviting me to be on the show.
Now, you guys have created this Unity Convention or this Unity Congress here at Gauteng in the Western Cape to create a common vision for coloured leaders in South Africa. It's not a regional event, I understand. It's a national event. Just tell me a little bit about your motivation for this.
Coloured people are the result of racial integration. And the whole liberation struggle was about non-racialism. But then they run away from the product of racial integration. I'm a product of non-racialism. White fathers, black or coloured mothers. But we have not been made to feel welcome by both the white and the black societies in South Africa. Although we see ourselves as God's creation, God only made man. The names man gave to himself afterwards is not God's doing. He made man and he made woman. But we made Xhosas and Zulus and Coloureds and all sorts of names, and then we start distinguishing between ourselves and attaching value in terms of shades of grey. And we thought that it's time that we should stand up here and say, no, we are also God's creation. We demand equal rights, equal opportunities like everybody else.
Now, I understand by just listening to some of the presentations in this Congress that there's a growing discontent amongst coloured leaders that the hopes and aspirations prior to 1994 has not been realised in South Africa 19 years later. Am I correct in saying that?
You are quite correct. The people were all starry-eyed 1994. They were looking at a brighter future, equality between all people, no discrimination, equal opportunities, one man, one vote, all the slogans. But now those stars in their eyes have dimmed. They realize they're no more at the crossroads. They're at a cul-de-sac. They're at a dead end. They realize that secularism has even destroyed our moral base of society. The church is playing a diminishing role. The church is so big, but the church's influence is waning. We see that our children are seeking refuge in drug abuse. We see the breakup of families. We see crime at unexpected levels of crime we are experiencing. We never expected that after giving people so much freedom, they won't be able to exercise the freedom with responsibility. And we see that the church is made helpless, as helpless bystanders to what's happening because of the government's secular attitude.
Now, we understand those are all of the problems, and you've come up, or your Congress has come up with the Liberty and Equality Declaration. Now, there's some very important clauses in this, and I want to ask you, how do you see this thing going forward? And is there a wide agreement amongst coloured leadership and people in South Africa for this Liberty and Equality Declaration?
Coloured people generally is not a homogeneous group. They're heterogeneous. You get the Khoi, you get the San, you get those with 80% white blood, only 10% colored blood. Then you get those with 10% white blood, and just the other way around. We got the Khoi, we got the Griqua, we got the Korana, all of them. And then it came to me, I must look for the answers in the Bible. When the storms come and you feel that you are drowning, build the ark. That's what God instructed Noah. So I said, all of you will come under this ark where you will receive shelter till the storms die down. Let's form one umbrella organization. Let's keep our eye riveted above. Noah only had a small little window at the top of the ark from which he could see when the storms had subsided and the dove brought a little twig to him and he knew it's safe to come out. We need to build that ark. And we're starting to build that ark today, where different people can come who used to be enemies, used to be in opposition to each other, come into this ark without attacking each other, without mauling. The lion didn't maul the little goat, neither did the dog bite the cat, or neither did the snake bite Noah. And that's why God said there's peace. And God saved them and let the storms subside. And our storms that is facing us in the political sense will only start to diminish when we as South Africans, as a people, all come together with all our little differences and differences of the past. Shall I say, past enemies. Forget all those differences that kept us apart. Come together under this one ark, under this one umbrella organization, and keep your eyes focused on God.
Now you're saying this umbrella organization, it's not a political party. Is this what you're saying? Or is this just a movement for even political parties to come in and enjoy the unity that you're trying to forge here?
Everybody would be welcome. And whatever is going to be decided, they will have to decide as a unit. It's not going to be anybody prescribing to anybody else. Each one of these organizations, whether it be a civic organization or religious group or political party, will have the same number of representatives in this ark, in this umbrella body, 3 each. So nobody will be in a dominant position. They'll have to work on a basis of consensus on everything which they... But we have agreed principles, and those principles which will guide us is what is contained in the Memorandum of Liberty and Equality.
I see, and you also talked about the Supreme Council that will guide and lead this thing, and you're still busy constituting that. One of the things that was very interesting in the Liberty and Equality Declaration is you call for no distinction to be made, nor should race quotas be applied to previously disadvantaged groups when affirmative action measures are implemented. And of course, you're referring to what's happening in the correctional services where colored people can't get promotion and all of that. But then you go on to say, in order to start a healing process in South Africa and nation building, all children born of white parents after 1994 should also qualify to benefit directly from affirmative action measures. Now that's unique. That's a new spin. I've never heard any other movement coming up with that. Why is that there, and how do you think this is going to succeed?
You know, when God said you must love your neighbor, He didn't say you must love your black neighbor and forget about the white one. It's an act of love. It's an act of reconciliation. In the end, we are all going to live together as friends or die together like fools. And I believe that white children born after 1994 has never experienced any benefits under apartheid. There are some white people who's also suffered financially, even more than blacks, because of economic sanctions being applied against them because of apartheid. The whole world applied economic sanctions against South Africa. White businesses that never supported apartheid also suffered. Maybe they supported parties who opposed apartheid, but they also suffered because they were white. Should they not also qualify for affirmative action? If you look at the Namibia model, the Namibia also have, in 2001, Namibia also came out with an affirmative action policy, and Namibia is our next door neighbors. And they say affirmative action is an individual benefit, not for a group. And if you as a white person or colored or black can prove that you suffered under apartheid or past policies, you could benefit. Why not South Africa? Affirmative action should never be an act of revenge. If you want to bring about equality, do it in a just way and in a fair way. Because we must start the process of nation building and not only seek revenge.
I agree with you, Mr. Murray. Final question. Are you the leader of this organization, or is there leaders still to be elected for this movement?
I'm not the leader. I'm the deputy president of the Triple B, which stands for Brain Bemachtiging Beweging. I'm a founder member of it. Dr. Danny Tatter is the president. I'm the deputy president. I don't see myself as making a return to politics. I see myself there in the background being the petrol of this vehicle.
Being the petrol of this vehicle. That's a very interesting concept. So you're going to use your experience, obviously, to give a lot of advice and just keep this movement going forward.
Correct. We must. You do need the grey heads to guide the young men. But you must never put an old man against Goliath. That's the job of a David, full of fight, full of spirit, full of faith. The energy of a young bull is required to defeat Goliath, but he must have the backing of the elders.
I like that. And in the conference, there was a repeated call for the Davids and the Joshuas to come forth, especially amongst the colored community now, to lead this thing forward. That's all the time we have for this. Was a very unique program because we're reporting from a congress in the Western Cape about colored people coming together, and this is going to be one of the first reports on the elections that's coming up in 2014. So God bless you, keep on praying, and we'll see you next week.